So when you were 8, you gave a speech and it went really well, and
Yeah.
you kind of adopted this identity of being a good speaker.
Yeah, let me run you through that story real quick. So 8 years old, my dad was our Pop Warner football coach, and we just won the championship. We're riding a high. I'm feeling good. I'm at this banquet, and there's pizza, there's cake, there's everything that this young kid could ever imagine and ever want, and a big old trophy at the end. But I spent most of that banquet not thinking about any of that, because right before it started, my dad pulls me over. He's talking to this woman I've never seen before, all business-y and intimidating, and she looks at me and she's like, "Oh, your dad says you're gonna be introducing one of the teams today." And I get shocked, total panic. I mean, I would have been nervous at 18, let alone 8, and I got 30 minutes to think about it, but I didn't have a choice. So eventually, time comes. I walk up to that stage, got this 8.5 by 11 sheet in front of me, everything I'm about to say. I'm beet red, I'm nervous, but I give my spiel. Walk off stage not feeling like I did anything special, but people flooded me right after to tell me how great I'd done. And there's a really funny thing about memory. I have no idea how I actually did.
Mm-hmm.
I assume I actually did well. I assume people were being genuine. I don't think everyone would have told me I did well if I didn't, but I don't know for sure. But I sure as well remember it like I did. So I had this then belief that I was a good public speaker. And it became a subtle identity. I wasn't going around telling everyone, I'm a great speaker, I'm a great speaker, I'm a great speaker. But whenever there was an opportunity for someone to speak in front of the class, to lead a group, I always rose my hand. I was like, I got this. It's okay. I get nervous, I do it, but it instilled a belief that became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I allowed myself to get enough reps where it actually became real.
I want to double tap on this because this is so interesting, both from the story itself, but right before we started recording, you asked, is there anything that you've been wanting to talk about that you
Yeah.
haven't talked about on the podcast? And this is exactly it.
Okay.
I told you, I don't know, but we'll see. This experience of doing something, and regardless of how it goes, getting positive feedback and positive reinforcement,
Yeah.
you had that story, I am a good speaker. And like you just mentioned, you have no idea if you actually did a good job, but because you had that story, that influenced how you carried yourself, how you went into future opportunities. And it's something that I wrote about recently.
Hmm.
I had an opportunity, not an opportunity, I had something happen to me where people told me I was really good at remembering names.
Mm.
Before that moment, I was really bad at remembering names, or maybe I was average. You know, you meet someone, they say their name, and then you're like,
Yeah.
crap, like what'd they just say?
Yeah.
And I had this instance where I was at a party and I remembered 3 people's names in a row somehow. I met them at the beginning, and then when I was leaving, I was like, "All right, I'll see you guys later," and just like boom, 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 said their names. And one of the people looked at me and they go, "Wow, you must be really good at remembering names." And from that moment, literally until now, I'm 30 years old,
Yeah.
I am really good at remembering names. And
Yeah.
so there's so much power in the stories that other people tell us,
Yeah.
and then the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes is the short answer, but I'll give a small quip. I remember I have a good friend from high school who I hadn't seen in maybe a year. Meet up to get lunch with him and his wife, and I mentioned a couple things that they told me in the past just to catch up on. They're like, "Wow, you have a really good memory." And again, I didn't really think I did, but it was after they said that I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. Maybe I do." And it definitely made me want to be thoughtful going into future conversations with people, to actually make sure that I was asking them the questions that they're not being asked, or just remembering little pieces from our conversations. And there's definitely a whole lot of bad things that come along with this too. The self-reinforcing prophecies of the things that didn't push us forward. But yeah, the recent phrase that I have been chewing on a lot, and it's my little reminder, is identity is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I don't know what's more powerful than who we tell ourselves we are.
Wow, I love that. Who we tell ourselves we are is so powerful, and I think a lot of it is influenced by what other people tell us we are,
Mm,
or what we think other people are thinking about who we are.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
something that was a big challenge for myself of I was being who I thought other people wanted me to be
Mhm.
rather than my true self. And I know we're gonna have so much fun today in this conversation because we're gonna talk about stories, but then we're also gonna get deep and philosophical.
Oh,
Before we go any further, I'd love to ask you, when you meet someone new, say you're at a barbecue, say you're at a hockey game, I don't know why that popped into my mind, and people ask you what you do, how do you answer that question?
it's something that I want to put a little bit more effort into. The short of it is I say that coach keynote speakers and executives that are taking on their next stage, their next moment to whether it's brand themselves, brand their company, or brand their idea. I'm not the one always who's delivering the ideas, but I'm helping people to understand the right way is just such a self-absorbed way of saying it. So I don't want to say that, but helping people understand a new way that they might be able to express what it is that has brought them there so that it makes sense, so that it actually turns people to action. That's further than I normally go into it. I normally just give the title of it, and it's something pretty different, which I'm sure you have the experience of yourself, where it's not the typical job, so people get a little bit intrigued and tend to ask more. So yeah, that's it.
That's beautiful. So you're a speaker yourself,
Mhm.
you're a coach,
Yeah.
you're a speaker coach,
Mhm.
and we also have some similarities in our background that I want to get
Yeah.
into around we both worked in finance at one point
Mhm.
and we both made transitions away. And I mean, that's the whole theme of this podcast,
Yeah.
the moment where you dared to dream
Mhm.
and then what came next and the whole journey.
Mhm.
And you were sharing something as we were setting up that was really interesting that when you left finance,
Mhm.
you changed some things both physically and maybe mentally or
Yeah.
environmentally about yourself. Tell us a little bit about that.
So it was actually before I left finance. I started to feel like it because the changes began happening before I left. It definitely made me feel more like a square peg in a round hole while I was still in the industry. I knew I wanted to change. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but it was a little bit on what you mentioned about being more true to yourself and not just fitting the mold of where I was, but fitting the mold of who I was. And what that initially transpired into was a couple things that at the oopsie. It was a couple things that at the time I actually questioned if it was relevant, if it even mattered, or if it was just another band-aid that I was putting on to try to address a bigger problem. I cut my hair. Buzz cut. I don't know. Felt right. Felt a little bit more clean and tight. And it just felt like a brand image of something a little bit more edgy. Changed my style. Nothing crazy, but no longer the buttoned up finance guy that walked into the room and just was the same as everyone else. And I just started to lean more into something that I had forgotten had been a huge part of my life up until I was in this world where I assumed you just weren't allowed to be it, which is I leaned into my creativity. It was really funny. So I was at this networking event and I met this woman who's become a really close friend of mine. Keely, hi. Um, and she asked me if I was creative. I literally said no. And then I paused and I was like, well, when I was a kid, I drew a lot. I actually went to an art college for car design. Then I did ceramics. Oh yeah, I write speeches. Oh yeah, I guess I am creative. But I had labeled myself in this world of straight line thinking, that creativity wasn't something that I did because I like numbers. I was like, why can't I be both? So I shaved my head, changed my style, and leaned into that creativity, all while not really knowing exactly what was going to happen. And it wasn't those things alone where life started to transpire, but it helped.
I have such a similar story
Go.
around creativity and
Yeah.
working in finance and being like, I'm not creative. I'm the guy who crunches numbers all day and I live in Excel. But I remember I actually have it over there in a notebook. I have a little sticky note on one of the first pages of this journal. And I wrote like the biggest lie I ever told myself is that I'm not creative.
Yeah.
Because when you get outside of the finance box or prison that a lot of companies put you in, you realize that, yeah, we're all creative in some capacity or another. And like, I love hearing that story because now I know that you draw, you've done ceramics.
Yeah.
You went to college for car design.
That was, I went to an art college when I was in middle school for car design. I did a summer program. I
Wow.
had a lot of fun with it. Actually, was the one who led our class's presentation.
Of course.
Yeah. Rose my hand for that one. But yeah, that was a cool path I went down, but ultimately decided that I wasn't the right one for me. But I was always exploring that idea.
So you worked in finance. You've now transitioned fully out of it.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit, in addition to shaving your head, changing your style, what else has happened since? And like, where were you and where are you now? And then I want to really get into some of the fun stories.
I spent a lot of time wondering if this day would ever come. I I had a knack for pushing myself. I grew up weightlifting. The same year that I gave that first speech was the same year I picked up my first barbell.
At 8 years old?
8 years old.
Damn.
My dad was a bodybuilder. Uh, but I grew to love it pretty quick. Um, but what came behind that was this idea of long-term thinking, discipline, diligence, and pushing yourself. So I did a bodybuilding competition, and then I kept doing all of these different diets. I did 75 hard. I would just cut like crazy for fun, and these were all cool. They all served a purpose. Now that I feel like I've actually taken this step into the ultimate purpose, but underneath each of them was this idea that they weren't really hard for me because they were so ingrained in my identity that me cutting alcohol and working out 2 times a day for 75 days and doing all this stuff was just like, yeah, whatever, it's plug and play, let's go. And I mentioned this all because I knew it was kind of it just felt like I was not doing the thing that I really wanted to, which is like, let's actually change things. So that's where I was I knew I could do things. I knew I could push really hard, but I wasn't really confident that I would actually take this step to have the conversation, both with myself and with my team, and say that this isn't the right path for me. So that's where I was. Where I am today is I had the conversation. Hi. And I've begun to it's funny. I remember in the bold action community saying a little bit about this is that I feel like I'm telling the story while it's not complete, but I mean, is it ever complete? Um, I still got a long ways to go. But like you encouraged me to say is I've come a really long way. So even just having had the courage to have said, you know what, there's more to life. And this isn't to bag on anyone in finance by any means, because there is a lot of fulfillment to be had, especially in the industry that I was working in,
You were in wealth management?
wealth management. But more so just to actually ask myself the question of, is this the path for me where I'm going to feel like I made the most of my, hopefully 80 years? And the answer was no. So where I am today is bridging that path, finding that path, taking steps forward, and getting punched a little bit along the way.
Oh, constantly. Constantly. I was just 2 things popped into my mind when I got to the office this morning. One is that a lot of people in this co-working space we're in are still working today, even though it's a holiday.
Mhm.
I was like, yeah, of course, like we're entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And then right after that, I was like, yeah, everyone here is going to be working on holidays and talking about getting punched in the face. Like that's kind of just par for the course. But I want to ask a couple questions about that. So are you fully doing your own thing as a coach of executives who are preparing for keynotes, or are you still working for the company as well in wealth management?
Fully,
Okay.
100% coaching. So I told my team that I was going to be leaving February of last year. I thought I might get fired that day. Thought maybe I'd have 3 more weeks. I was getting married in 3 weeks, and there was some of the guys were going to be there, and I just didn't feel right keeping that secret from them and then telling them like right after. That felt wrong. Um, and I thought maybe max I'd be there till April. I actually ended up working there until December. They were hurt. It was hard, but the hardest part about this whole process is I wasn't coming from some toxic workplace. I was working with people that I loved and love. So it was really tough, but they showed their character when it all happened and truly put my best interest forward and allowed me to dictate some terms that really helped me to start this in December with a little bit of a idea of where I was going and a lot more momentum than I would have had otherwise. So fully in it, 6 months now. Um, and it's different. It's fun.
It's definitely different. I'm excited to get into it. I didn't realize that our stories were so similar
Okay.
with a lot of the things. Like
Yeah.
the company I left, I love railing against the finance industry as a whole, but the company that I worked at specifically was amazing.
Yeah.
I'm still really good friends with my manager at the time. It was like me as an analyst, the senior analyst, super good friends with, and then my manager. I literally just went on a run with him on Monday.
Wow.
And so that moment where you know you're gonna tell your company that you're leaving, but you haven't yet, and it's like the morning of, and you're doing your normal tasks, and you have this call on your calendar with your manager for the afternoon.
Yeah.
Like, that is such a challenging moment that
Yeah.
I think a lot of people fantasize and dream about, both on the positive and then also worrying about how's it gonna go. My experience was very similar around them obviously being bummed because 'cause they're losing someone that they enjoy, who's good at their job, but them being way more supportive than I thought they would be.
Mhm.
And if people care about you, they're gonna want you to do what you want to do with your life.
Yeah.
They're gonna want you to be happy.
Mhm. Yeah. It's fun to find those people, and it's really fun when you get to actually go through those moments and your assumptions are wrong for all the best reasons. And how often my assumptions are wrong is absurd. It's one of the some things I actually remind myself before I step on stage is, um, let me go on a little bit of a tangent.
Please.
I like to think of myself as a speaker coach, but I've had a lot of clients tell me that it's a lot more than speaker coaching. And the reason for that is I went through a pretty gnarly bout with anxiety for like a year and a half. You might call it depression because, like, fuck, it sucked. But I am so happy it happened because it was inevitable and was the only way for me to actually begin to live life in a truly balanced manner. The essence of what happened was I may have like some amount of OCD. I don't like to say it because I don't like to label it, but I do have obsessive tendencies. And I was obsessing over thoughts, over fictitious scenarios, real scenarios, but grabbing onto assumptions and then nuclear bombing them into something crazy. And my therapist saw this all happening and One day she stopped me because it's been happening again and again and again and again. She's like, "Hey, Matt, I'm noticing." Well, there was a thought that we had kind of played through, hadn't gone the way I expected it to. She asked me to first say, "Well, what did you think was going to happen? What actually happened?" And then she asked me the next time that I was faced with a thought to ask myself, well, what's the best case? What's the worst case? And what's the most likely? And through repetition and repetition and repetition, and actually like building a library of these examples, come to realize how horribly wrong my assumptions can be and how often my best case is blown out of the water. And that was the situation of having that conversation with my team was best case blown out of the water. Just another mental note in my library of perspective to give myself in moments where things are challenging or where I expect them to be. And I'm probably going to be okay. Probably more so then.
We are terrible at predicting outcomes.
Horrible.
Like you said, the best case is usually so much bigger and grander and richer than you could possibly imagine. And all of those catastrophe worst cases never come true. And I think the thing that's most insidious about it to me is that you never go back and hold yourself accountable for all the times your mind was wrong.
Yeah.
All the times your mind said, oh man, you're going to bomb, you're going to fail, people are going to throw tomatoes at you, everything is going to go terribly. And then it goes great. And then your mind's like, oh yeah, I believed in you the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never verbalized this one, so I might butcher it, but there's this quote in the world of finance that the worst, or whenever you hear someone say it, or the worst thing that anyone can say is this time is different. So, but we hear that in finance and investing, and we're like, yeah, it's not. But we never take note to tell ourselves that and realize that it's probably not different. And you actually did better than you thought. So why not?
Oh my goodness, there's so many different ways I want to take this. I want to put a pin/bookmark
Okay.
in this time is different.
Okay.
We're going to talk about your interest, potential obsession, because you said you're obsessive about things in Bitcoin,
Oh, yeah.
and how your finance background might have influenced that, because I have a
Yeah.
whole lot of thoughts on that. But before we go there, I want to ask a question that people ask me a lot, and I have an answer now, but I didn't have an answer for a long time,
Mhm.
which is, how did you actually change your life? Like,
Mm.
was there any key thing you can point to as like, this was the moment that I actually decided I was going to have the conversation with my team to leave, versus like, this is something I'm talking about, it's something I want? What actually allowed you to take that action and change everything? Because you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube once you
Yeah.
have that conversation.
So I'm going to give a piece that you don't know about, and then I'm going to give a piece that you do know about. The piece that you don't know about is I was encouraged to read a book by actually the man, Jesse, shout out, who first gave me the idea to be a public speaking coach. I never even thought it was a thing. I had no idea. I was full-fledged, 100% set on working in Bitcoin. Bitcoin specifically, working, like interviewing all these Bitcoin companies. And it was meeting him when he just said, hey, I have a friend who's about to hire a speaking coach, and told me how much they were going to charge them. My jaw dropped because I didn't know you could. And he's like, I read this book called 2 Weeks Notice. And it's all about giving your 2 weeks notice, starting your own thing, and kind of countering some of the ideas that people have about what you need to have to start your own business. I try to take one thing away from every book that I ever read. If I try to inundate myself with a laundry list, then I just don't take anything. The one thing I took away from that was I actually wrote down the date that I was going to give my notice. It was pretty far out. It wasn't 2 weeks. It was actually originally March 1st, 2024. I have a picture with myself with a sticky note on my forehead. This is March 1st, 2024. But I pulled it back a month to February 1st because my wedding was February 24th. Those guys were going to be there. didn't feel right. So that was one thing. But that thing only happened because I did something else. It was what initially drew me to what you were doing, because you took it to a next level, but it's something similar to you. So I came to this decision. I shaved my head. I changed my style. I knew I wanted to change, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was paralyzed with that. How do you figure out what you want to do with no context and only knowing that you're not where you want to be? You come up with something equally ambiguous, but feels like a step in the right direction. So I'd read this book with our team a couple years before called The Index Card Business Plan. And the Index Card Business Plan walks you through a process of taking your big goals, call it 2, 3, 5-year goals, and turning them into weekly actionable steps that you can measure on an index card. I'd read the book before, I'd gone through the process to an extent, but it really hadn't been anything mind-blowing, mainly because I didn't have the right goal. But I went back to it. I sat back and I thought, I'm like, well, I don't know what I want, but I need to come up with something that is going to help me find something. So I came up with the idea that I was going to measure moments outside of my comfort zone and track it. Now, again, ambiguous, but I decided to make it unambiguous by defining what my comfort zone was. During COVID, I had this idea that I was an introvert. I realized that I wasn't. But I thought I was an introvert because I struggled to initiate conversation. And I realized that sitting on my couch, sitting on my ass, not meeting people wasn't going to be a way to figuring out what was next. So a lot of the comfort zone revolved around putting myself in those settings. It was meeting someone, handshake, getting their name. The getting their name part was what I felt crucial part of the process. It was going to networking events. I was actually just trying out new things. So for a while, it was actually getting out on the water and going surfing. But I'd set a goal on a weekly basis. I created a little accountability with it around the whole process with my wife, a couple bucks here and there. But it was week by week, conversation by conversation, that things started to kind of build and come into fruition. I found my first passion, which was Bitcoin, in the midst of this process. A little bit on the side, but it really motivated me through it. And one of those events that I went to was the one where I met Jesse, got introduced to the idea of speaker coaching. And there's no way I'd be in front of you today without that.
I feel like that is so common that people want to change, but they don't know how to change. That was my experience.
Yeah.
I spent from 22 when I graduated college to 25 when I quit my job in finance, trying to figure out what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I was using books, podcasts,
Mhm.
online personal development programs.
Yeah.
I was using all of those as tools to help me try and figure out what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I had this crazy, like, meta break from the Matrix moment
Okay.
where I realized that all the things I was trying to use to help me figure out what I wanted to do was what I wanted to do, which was help people with this personal development
Yeah.
journey of
Yeah.
discovery.
Yeah.
And I love that in the absence of a clear answer of what you needed to do next, you said, I'm going to do something. I'm going to measure moments outside my comfort zone. And I mean, that's why we get along so well,
Yeah.
is because that to me seems like the best option. And it's so cool you came to that on your own. That to me seems like the best option when you want to change and you don't know how to change or what to change.
Yeah.
Just start getting uncomfortable, start
Yeah.
doing things. And like you said, get off the couch, go meet people,
Yeah.
because that really just opens up doors, opportunities. You meet people and you increase the surface area of your luck and also your potential to have new things happen to you.
I had a thought while you were saying that, and it'll come into a question for you. What I love about what you said about your journey is the meta moment seems like you saw the personal development trap, which is learn, 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 never apply. And you saw all of that and said, personal development's great. Learn, learn, learn is great. But how do you actually take the next step? Hold action. Was that the realization that behind the personal development trap is the need to take action? Or how did it ultimately come to fruition for you?
I think that is my answer now, is that after you learn, you need to act
Mm-hmm.
and put it into motion in some way. Otherwise, you're stuck in that continuous learning loop without implementation.
Mm-hmm.
But the real honest answer is that I hit a point where the pain of staying the same exceeded the fear of whatever was going to happen next.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't ever recommend people do what I did, where you kind of light your entire life on fire and step into the unknown, because
Yeah.
it's wild. It's a roller coaster, but I didn't have any other options. And I know there's a lot of people out there, maybe some who are listening,
Yeah.
who are one soulless corporate interaction away from hitting that breaking point.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was reading a quote by Charles Bukowski
Mm-hmm.
talking about the 9 to 5 and how it's modern day slavery,
Yeah.
how they never pay the slaves enough to
Yeah.
be free,
Yeah.
just enough to come back to work. And it was that moment that really kind of broke the wall for me in terms
Yeah.
of, I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know I can't stay. Otherwise, my soul and like this life and my lightness I have is going to go away.
All my biggest breakthroughs came at my lowest lows, where I was in so much pain that I just had to do something. And you never really know when you're at your lowest low, but like you only know in retrospect when you start to climb out of it. How do you recommend that people not only act at their lowest low?
So they continue to take action and move things forward when things aren't that bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's this. We're both fans of Chris Williamson. Have you heard of him talk about the region beta paradox?
No.
It's this concept that when you look at it literally, it talks about how if a restaurant is a mile walk away from you,
Mm.
you might walk there,
Mm-hmm.
but a restaurant that is 2 miles away, you're going to end up driving.
Yeah.
And it's basically saying, like, he applies it to life through the lens of, if things are bad, but they're not that bad, you're not going to change.
Yeah.
And it's actually advantageous if either through circumstance or your own doing, your life gets worse,
Mm.
because it drops you below that
Yeah.
baseline of things are bad, but they're not that bad.
Yeah.
You get down to rock bottom. Holy shit, I need to change.
Yeah.
And then that catapults you, way past that baseline. So
So it's a feature, not a bug.
exactly. And how to continue acting when you're not in intense pain is a funny question, because I definitely agree with you that sometimes pain and being in the pain cave is a beautiful thing,
Mm-hmm.
because it forces you to act. I have a whole tangential story about that we might come back to. When you're not in pain and things are going pretty well, I think that is when you can look to the positive side of the coin, which to me is the dream.
Mm.
Like, what are the things that you really want to experience, you want to bring into the world? What are the memories, the impact you want to have on other people? That's like what pulls me forward and keeps me motivated. The other side of that coin, the dark side, is the regret and the pain.
Yeah.
And at rock bottom, realizing that if you don't change, you are going to have serious end of life regrets.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that answers the question in keeping to the light side. I think dream and regret are the same thing. It's just two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
Dream is positive, regret is negative. They're both really powerful motivators.
Yeah.
You can tap into both when you need them, but focusing on the thing that's pulling you forward instead of what you're running from.
I like that. Yeah. Well said.
Thank you. I definitely want to get into this love of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And are you still a big fan of Bitcoin?
Big time. I went
Okay.
to the conference 2-3 weeks ago.
Okay, so I really want to talk about this because I want to learn more about Bitcoin. So this is me selfishly interested.
Yeah.
But it's also, I have had trouble with Bitcoin because the people who explain it to me use the classic cliches in finance that whenever you hear, you wanna run in the other direction of,
Sure.
"It's different this time. This has never happened before.
Yeah.
It's gonna work 100%." It's just like all the things you learn in traditional finance
Yeah.
are said to describe Bitcoin, and it might just be people labeling it as that. But how have you gotten into Bitcoin having this traditional finance background as well?
A lot of people in the space talk about how it's actually harder to get into it from traditional finance than most would assume. Because if you are embedded in Keynesian economics, which is a buzzword, but I'll get past it, then it's hard to recreate your way of thinking about an economy and what's possible. I didn't find myself fully embedded in the philosophy and methodology that was being prescribed. And that was one of the things that pulled me away from the business that I was in is I wasn't fully aligned with all of our recommendations. There was like a lot of good intent, but it was really not being able to talk about Bitcoin that was a big drawback for me. Now, your question more though is why was I inclined to it, and what about it might make people consider it more than this funny investment that comes and goes every couple of years. A lot of people that you meet in Bitcoin, like Bitcoin specifically, I don't know anything about Bitcoin. I don't have any intentions to otherwise. Now, I should keep an open mind to say maybe, but right now, that's the case. And the reason is a lot of people you meet in Bitcoin, especially early adopters, they're very different than most people you meet day to day. They're anarchists. They push against, they've always questioned what's going on in the world. It never quite made sense. And they were always willing to say, no, I don't get it. No, I don't get it. I did not do that. I was plug and play, going forward, A-okay with the way things were. I did not want to question. But there was one thing that I did question. Told you I grew up in the weight room, 8 years old. By 13, I was scouring. The first forums that I scoured online were nutrition, supplementation, protein intake, what nutrients do I need to get to just get bigger.
So like bodybuilding.com? You're in the
Yeah,
forums there?
yeah, I was. I had my mindset on getting the bench press record at my high school, and anything that was gonna get me there was gonna happen. And with the obsession with lifting, with nutrition, you can't pick up a weight and say, tomorrow you're gonna look great. Mm-mm. Took me like 5 years to feel like I had substantial muscle mass. And it will continue to take me the rest of my life to maintain what I have. So you have to have a long-term approach. There's no way around it. But I saw the rest of the world and I was like, why does no one else really think more than tomorrow? Why do people eat slop and not exercise and not take care of themselves? And it was while learning about Bitcoin monetary history that I really started to think about the effect that our money has on how we think. Let me give you an extreme example. I never been myself, so speaking through others' experience, but I have a friend who lives in Egypt right now. Great guy, I met him through Bitcoin. He's living out there, and he told me about times where he would meet someone in the back of a car to exchange dollars for Egyptian Libra. Libra? Not allowed to do that, but the rate that you would get on the street was much better than the rate that you would get if you went to a bank. So people, there was this black market for dollars. He would get stacks this big for a couple $100 bills. Why? Because their currency is inflating to oblivion. So they have to make decisions, whether it's spend instantly or find something that is going to hold its value better than the current currency that they're using. So in this country right now, where people are living in the midst of a hyperinflating currency, a mega inflating currency, their thinking and how they act is being influenced by the currency around them. That's making them think more short-sighted because they have to. Now, we live in the United States, a country where we have the best currency in a basket of shit, though it holds its value a lot better than other currencies, but it still depreciates. We still have to think, I made this money. If I don't do anything about it, it is going to lose value. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So that's going to influence our thinking. And it was this thought experiment of what if we had a money that we knew the rules of? That's value might change by supply and demand, but not by someone's decision to change the mechanics of it. If we had a money that over time should increase in value based on increases in productivity over the long term, how would that influence our thinking? And it was while going through that thought experiment and realizing the depth that had been put into the development of this and the care that the community takes of it and how it really is the people's money by the distributed nature of it and there being no overarching figure that controls it, that made me think, you know what, this could be the biggest shift in society that we might ever see. So it's a possibility. It's not a certainty. Like people like to say it's inevitable. It's inevitable if we make it inevitable. People have to try for something that we've never seen before. But it is the first time that we've taken money, something essential to our society. We would not be recording this podcast if money was never created, because we would not be able to have this specialized ability to distribute information because we just need to survive. So without money, we wouldn't be able to survive, but money has been corrupted again and again and again throughout history. So it's an opportunity to have money that isn't dictated by someone, it's dictated by me and you equally as anyone else. And that just felt like an unbelievable possibility.
That was a beautiful description of how you change your thoughts around it without it being super dogmatic and being, this is inevitable, it has to happen. I feel like my experience of certain people in the Bitcoin community is it almost is like a religion to them.
Well, it
It's
is.
like a religion and it's like the new path forward. And I get all of that. And when you start talking about anything through that lens, emotion comes into it.
Yes.
So that was beautiful. I want to ask you a lot of questions about this offline
Yeah.
because I've been looking for people to learn from
Yeah.
in that space. But one thing that I want to ask you about that came out from that story was you in the weight room
Yeah.
talking about how you understood at a young age how long it takes for changes to show up
Mm-hmm.
and to see that growth. How has that played out in your life? It sounds like you are good at delaying gratification and realizing that I'm going to do the work today and I might not see the rewards from it for 5 years.
It's played out in subtle ways. And it's hard to actually pinpoint exactly how it's played out because some of it has just become so innate to who I am. It's hard to know any different. But I don't know. I just keep doing it because I find the moments where it's hard, it works as being so eternally gratifying that it makes you forget about every ounce of hard and just make you want to keep doing hard again. So one thing that I highlighted on just briefly when I was talking about comfort zones was learning to surf. Still learning 3 years later. I'll probably be learning till I'm 80. My son will definitely be starting surfing way younger than I did.
I
But
agree with that statement.
I always say I am so surprised, genuinely so surprised I got through the first 6 months. I threw out both shoulders, threw out one paddling like some flailing fish. And then when that one healed the next day, threw out the other. I had more cuts and bruises than when I played football. So much pain. But then I'd catch a wave and I'd be smiling like a child on the sand. I'd go out to get another one. I'd get slammed again. I'd be like, all right, we're going to call it quits for today. But yeah, it's just there's something different about hard accumulating to win than eating an Oreo and getting a little taste of yum. They're incredibly different. One's way more accessible, but one makes for a better story. One makes for no story. And I remember hearing someone say that they live their life for story. And maybe it's cheesy and maybe it's a weird way to segment your life, but it feels like a pretty fun one.
And obviously, for everyone listening who knows me and what I'm about, I have "Live a Story Worth Telling" tattooed on my arm, and it really is, the story is everything. Because a
Yeah.
good story has highs, it has lows.
Hmm.
It takes a while. It didn't happen easily. It didn't happen overnight. That's actually something that I sometimes struggle to relate with people on,
Yeah.
is wanting the quick fix, the overnight success.
Yeah.
I'll get people on LinkedIn reach out to me all the time who say like, "Let me do this and this and this for you, and you'll blow up and
Yeah.
you'll be super successful overnight and
Yeah.
you'll make all this money." And then we have a conversation and I have to explain that that's not what I want. I want the slow eruption over time, because then it feels worth it and it feels meaningful
Yeah.
versus, and again, maybe I'm just blowing smoke out my ass and I'm creating this story because of where I'm at and how hard things are
Yeah.
and how it does take time. But there is this piece I really resonate and relate to you on, of the delayed gratification.
Yeah.
It's one of the best compliments I've ever gotten from a mentor and friend of mine. He's like, "Dude, you are unbelievably good at delaying gratification and you work incredibly hard, and I've noticed."
Yeah. Yeah. I want to touch on one thing that you said. A couple weeks ago, I was meeting with a coach of mine. Awesome dude. Is it okay if I keep giving shout outs?
Of course,
Doug,
please.
love you, man. Um, and he asked me, he's like, "Yo, how are you doing?" I was like, "Fantastic." He's like, "Do you mean it or are you just saying it?" And I was like, "Is there any difference?" And when you were talking, you were saying how, I don't know if I'm just blowing smoke on my ass, but we got to tell ourselves the right thing because over time it becomes real. There were a lot of times when I was going through my bouts of anxiety where I knew something, I knew something, I knew something, I knew something, and then I believed it. That was a huge shift. But you don't go from knowing to believing overnight. It's a conscious process. So keep blowing smoke up your ass.
When you're saying I knew something, I knew something, I knew something, and then I believed it, like you knew it intellectually,
Yeah.
but you hadn't believed it enough to like implement or do something with it.
I'll expand a little bit. So the nature of my anxiety was around something called intrusive thoughts. It's become a little bit more talked about, but at the time I had no idea what they were, and I thought there was something really wrong with me. It took me a couple months to tell my wife about it. I thought she might be scared of me. They're really dark. It sucked. Um, but when I started to go to therapy, started to open my eyes to that these were normal and that they happen. Everyone has them. It's just like what meaning you assign to them. And I knew that. And then I would forget it. And then I'd read on, and I would need to go on the internet, read some forum and tell me I was okay. And then I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. And I knew it. I kept on assigning all this meaning to them. I was scared of them, terrified that they keep coming up. And guess what? They still do. I don't give a fuck because I know they're not true. So it took a while to go from knowing to believing. And there's a lot of other instances like that, but that was one of them.
That's helpful. I love the specific detail there. It's so interesting that two people can experience the same things, and the story that we tell ourselves about the thing makes all the difference.
Yeah.
Because I've certainly had crazy intrusive thoughts before,
Yeah.
but I've never thought too much of it.
Yeah.
Maybe because they happened after I had learned a little bit about spirituality and how we're not our thoughts.
Yeah.
Our mind just kind of creates these random things.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me want to ask about something that you had mentioned before, not on the podcast, but before,
Yep.
which was, when you were kind of in this dark period, you realized that you were blaming other people, kind of blaming everything
Yeah.
externally. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'd always been the good kid. Parents loved me, grandparents loved me. Everyone told me I was going to be successful. Why? Because I did what I was told. I was choosing the right major. I was doing the right things. I was studying. I was doing what everyone told me. It was never what I really wanted to do. Little anecdote. I have no regrets about this, but like, I really didn't want to play football. The only recurring nightmare I've ever had is going back to football practice. But I kept doing it because I was way too scared to change, to go against what people thought of me and what I was told to do. And there was a lot of resentment around that and a lot of resentment around the path that I was on. And I blamed everyone for it. It was all everyone's fault. Because whenever I would try to speak up, they would shoot me down. But it was in the midst of all this anxiety that I finally began to think about it and to ask myself, had you really spoken up? Maybe here and there I'd say something. I'd get shot down, sure. But I never kept trying. It was like I expected, well, no, actually, that's not even right. I was going to say it was like I expected all I needed to do was say something once and then people would give me the credit. When in reality, it was just easier for me to do what other people were saying, to blame them for it, because then I didn't have to take responsibility for where I was. It was everyone's fault. It was everyone's fault I wasn't happy. Nah, it was all my fault. And I remember when I had that realization, because I was like initially a little bit scared of it, and then a big smile crossed my face. I was like, holy shit, I can actually move forward. Now, taking that first step, really hard. Each one was hard, hard, less hard, less hard, less hard. Then it became a habit where I finally said, okay, I care about my opinion most. And I hate this idea that selfishness is a bad thing. Because, like, who the fuck else are you supposed to live for? If you can't live for yourself, then you're just miserable. Yes, think about others. Because, like, the best way to be fulfilled is to have people around you, people who care about you and to care about other people. But think about yourself. Because that's a downstream effect. What's going on inside will always come out in some way, shape, or form. When I finally started taking ownership for my life and realizing it was my fault, my responsibility to decide what that was going to look like, I was finally able to write my own path, but also realize I always had been, just like I had a ghostwriter and I was okay with that.
I love the idea of selfishness being a good thing and not a bad thing. It's a hill I'll die on because when you aren't willing to put yourself first and fill your own cup, you show up as a suboptimal version of yourself.
Yeah.
You show up burnt out and exhausted and tired and angry and frustrated and hangry because you didn't eat because you had to prioritize other things.
Yeah.
And this idea that for whatever reason we've gotten in our heads that it's not okay to, oh, it's kind of both ways. It's both not okay to care for yourself, and then you
Yeah.
hear the things like, "Oh, you have to put on your oxygen mask first." That's a nice platitude to say, but how many people are actually willing to say, "I know you need me right now, but I need to meditate for 10 minutes," or "I need to go to the gym this morning
Yeah.
because it's gonna allow me to show up better for you." That's something that I'm so about because I've seen who I am when I don't put
Yeah.
myself first.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a loaded word because people mistake it for what it is and it isn't. I think the people that people believe are selfish, who they look at and they're like, that guy's a dick. Or that gal's a dick. Who knows? Or whatever word you want to use for it. I just don't think they know how to live life. What I mean by that is allowing others into your life, caring for other people is one of the most fulfilling things that you can do. So inherently, I love helping people for me. for them too. But like, don't discount what it brings to you as well. But it's a balance. I would love to be able to go to the gym 7 days a week. I used to. But I have a child now. Beautiful wife at home who I want to spend loads of time with. Miles Taylor, hi. So I have to make a conscious decision of the right balance of me time and them time. And the needle's moving a little bit because I want it to. So the answer isn't, give advice here, I guess, to everyone out there, whatever. The answer isn't, you need to meditate for 6 hours a week. You need to go to the gym 5 times a week. The answer is what works best for you. In that you know what that answer is, rather than just meandering and trying to find it. Like actually asking, trying, iterating, but finding a balance.
Oh man, you just hit on so many things there because I agree 100%. The only way people learn things is experimentation, iteration, trying, failing.
Yeah.
But that's not what most people want. And I'm specifically thinking about creating content right now.
Yeah.
People want advice. They want you, Matt, to look at the camera and say, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
Step 1, 2, and 3, go do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what the marketplace wants and what the world wants.
Yeah.
But I'm speaking for myself here. That's not what I want to provide.
No.
I always end, and I'm talking about LinkedIn now because you and I met on LinkedIn. I always end my post being like, and then do what works for you. Like, don't listen to anyone else. Don't even listen to me. This might be helpful. And I feel like there's a tension between, especially because we're both in the coaching world, there's a tension between people just wanting you to give them the answer.
Yeah.
And as people who have changed our lives drastically, knowing that no one else can give you the answer.
No.
They can definitely be with you along the way and give you things to think about and ask good questions, but there is no easy advice that you can go implement. And maybe that goes back to both of us really resonating with the delayed gratification thing.
Yeah. It's hard because it feels like an excuse. But it's a battle online. It's a battle internally of content and content strategy. Do you play trends? Or do you go with what feels right for you? Because you don't know if what feels right for you will ever pay off. But I also think payoff is a loaded word because there's the instant gratification of virality, which literally brings you nothing. It does fucking nothing. Or there's the actual gratification of the people that reach out to you and say, hey, you helped me do X. Or the ones that you end up getting to work with and seeing it all come to fruition. So that is actually an arena where I can internally get better about delayed gratification. That algorithm, it can fuck with me. But I think you're hitting on the right point, which is like to not just play into it and decide how you want to give back to the world and be, is the right word, dogmatic about it until maybe it pays off.
Yeah, it definitely feels like you have to constantly go against what the algorithm is saying, what the experts are saying. And I question myself. I know what feels better for me in terms of alignment and authenticity. It definitely feels better to say, hey, here's my experience, take it or leave it, versus being like, creating content that's authoritative and like, this is what you should do. And I question whether me choosing to do things my way is me playing small and me being afraid of actually doing what might work. Yeah. Do you struggle with that at all?
Yes. Big time. Yeah, it's hard because there is a relevant blend in there. The blend is reach is good because you can add in what you know and influence more people. But if it's wrong reach where you're just giving the algorithm what it wants to hear and it's going to keep people feeling like they're hearing the right things and ultimately not doing anything, then is it the right reach? Is it actually reach? The algorithm can tell you you had 1 million impressions, but if you had 0 impact, then there's no reach. You got 200 impressions, 2 impacted, sounds like more reach. So yeah, it's a struggle because you're often operating in silence. You don't know the impact you're having, but occasionally it comes up. I definitely tried to please the algorithm for a while, but I found more and more people, my clients, friends, whoever it may be, really resonating with what came authentically to me. So it was exhausting to play that other game. And I just leaned into the second order effects of content creation, which is writing is the best thing I have ever done for my speaking by a long shot. 2 reasons. Familiarity, bringing an idea in the deep corners of your mind, making it abundantly clear on paper. Secondly, you're making it abundantly clear because you're actually seeing it from point A to point B. You ever try to see something from point A to point B in your mind? It doesn't work. On paper, you actually give yourself that chance. So I keep creating content that I want to write about because I then get to speak about it. So at the end of the day, if it only ever impacts the people I have conversations with, okay. But I don't think that's going to be the case.
What came up for me as you shared all of that is that someone might be doing the thing that feels super authentic and aligned for them, and then they take off, they become an expert. It worked super well. So then that strategy or that style of content is taken out of context and mapped on to other people. And it's not going to work for them because it's not aligned.
Mm-hmm.
That came up for me. And then what also came up for me is something I haven't really thought about until recently, which is I think there's a fear of if I do the thing that the experts tell me to do and it doesn't work, that means I failed. If I keep doing the thing that feels good, that feels aligned, and things don't grow as fast as I maybe want them to, that's fine because I'm being true to myself.
Mm-hmm.
There's that side of it.
Yeah.
But then there's the, what if I do the things that the experts say
Yeah.
and it works, but it feels really shitty?
Yeah.
So it's like all the different ways the mind can do it. And I think it's a really thin line between doing something, let's flip it, not doing something because it's not aligned, it doesn't feel good,
Yeah.
not doing something because you're scared.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nearly impossible to know in the moment
Yeah.
which one, which is the reason you're avoiding it.
Yeah. I can see some of that happening. Even just me figuring out different arenas in my business that I can operate in. Doing more and more training, but it's something that I've not done as much of. Very comfortable in the one-on-one setting, but it feels like a way for me to influence more people. And I've definitely shied away from it out of fear rather than possibility. And I've leaned on the over a year of being in the one-on-one arena and getting that skill and feeling comfortable in it and kept going down that path rather than starting anew in it. So that's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, but aligned to what you're saying, which is, which one is it? Little by little, you figure it out, but dare to dream, my friend.
Yeah, you got to keep trying different things and constantly questioning. I think questioning is a good thing.
Yeah.
I want to take a slight left turn, talk a little bit
Perfect.
about your family.
Mm.
The question I have is, what does your wife think of your speaker voice?
My speaker voice. Like literally the voice that I use?
I'll give you some more context.
Okay, yeah. And I think I know the other path it might be, but continue.
The context I'm coming at this question from is that when I was preparing for my TEDx,
Yeah.
the people who know me, the people who knew me best would have the most critical feedback to give because they'd be like, "Why are you talking like that?
Yeah.
Like, why aren't you just saying this normally." And I'd be like,
Yeah.
"What do you mean? I am saying it normally." They're like, "No, you're not.
Yeah, yeah,
You're talking in a different way than you normally talk."
yeah.
And for people who don't know me very well,
Yeah.
they'd be like, "Oh, that sounds great."
Yeah.
So both my girlfriend and my roommate, who's living with me at the time, gave me the best feedback in terms of this is different. And I'm working with a client right now who is getting into speaking, and like some of the coaching we're doing is around speaking.
Yeah.
And her harshest feedback comes from her husband.
Yeah.
And I explained to her, I was like, he's gonna have harsh feedback because he's so close to you and so used to hearing you talk normally that when you give a speech, you probably are gonna talk a little bit differently.
I remember 6, 7 years ago, I was at the gym with my wife, and we ran into this guy at the gym. Someone who was new to our office, had only gotten to know briefly. He walks up, he's talking to us, and he's like, "Your husband's such a professional." And she looks at me and she laughs. She's like, "Him?" And I've forever been on the path since to bridge those two. I want to be who I am at home when I'm on the stage. I'm a lot closer today than I was then, but I'm not all the way there yet. This is a lot closer than I can be on stage, but it's still a challenge because it's really easy to think that you're supposed to be that someone when in reality, everyone just wants someone else. Not someone else than you, but someone else than the someone that everyone thinks you're supposed to be. My wife hasn't been too critical of my speaker voice because I think that she thinks it's what, I think she thought, it's what I was supposed to be. But lately, she's gotten a lot, I've given her the permission to be a lot more able to provide me the feedback that I actually need. Until the last time that I actually practiced my most recent workshop in front of her, I always just got thumbs up. You're doing great. You're getting so much better. And I think underneath you're getting so much better is you're not sounding like so much of a robot. I didn't realize that until recently. But I actually gave her the permission the last time that I presented in front of her to give me real constructive feedback. And it was unbelievable. So I'm just going to throw this out. Doesn't seem like you have the issue, but for those that do, if you are struggling to get real feedback from friends, from anyone that you're trying to practice in front of in whatever arena, there's something I learned from Alex Hormozy called kind, not nice. And what that means is when he's working with someone on a presentation, working with them on a sales pitch, whatever it is that they might be doing, and they're running through with him, he takes the approach of kind, not nice, which means stopping them in the midst of it to say whatever's on his mind. If it's a slide that doesn't make sense, if it's a way that they said something, it's how they ended a sentence, he stops them there and says, this is what I got from this. Could you try it this way? And actually gives them the opportunity to try it out. A little bit away from what you asked, but at the same time, it was something that I needed for my wife to actually call out my speaker voice. Giving her the permission to stop me then, to say whatever was on her mind, and then actually see me implement it. That was how I was actually able to start recognizing from her lens that I was being robotic, that I was having a speaker voice. And until then, I hadn't really heard it.
Well, it's bringing up so many questions for me because to give even more detail, like 2 weeks before I was supposed to give my TEDx,
Yeah.
I like completely had a meltdown.
Oh, really?
And my girlfriend was like, "Yeah, stop speaking like that. Just talk normally." And so I started practicing it in front of her, and she's
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, that's way better."
Yeah.
And then I met with my speaker coach, and I would practice it with her weekly. And I started it, and she stopped me, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm just trying to be like more normal and like speak it." She's like, "Where did Gregory go? There's no enthusiasm. There's
Mm.
no excitement here."
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the piece that I've been trying to bridge the gap on is
Yeah.
I feel like when I'm excited,
Yeah.
I feel like that's what my speaker voice sounds like, but it doesn't sound like that to other people.
Yeah.
and I literally can't tell the difference at this moment. So I'm asking you as someone who coaches speakers,
Yeah.
should people have a different voice for when they're speaking, or should they really try and get on stage and speak totally normal? Because I like embedded in this question is Brene Brown, Mel Robbins. There's people who they seem to speak completely normal when they're on stage, and people seem to really resonate with that.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts. One, if normal is boring, it's not so much about the stage. It's about what your normal is. So
Wow,
if
that's
no,
so good. I haven't thought about that.
yeah, I think it's more of a, do you need to be different on stage? And um, bigger thing is, if normal is boring, then fix normal. That's okay. You can change. There's this guy, Jing, who's fantastic speaker coach in a little bit of a different way. He primarily focuses on the delivery, the voice of it. And he talks also a lot about identity and how, especially with our voice, it's really easy to get caught up in the mentality of, I can't change that because that's me. Well, me is learned. You didn't become you. You weren't born you. You learned to be you, which means you can unlearn to be you. You can be someone different. You can change your voice. There's ways to go about it, especially with voice, to make it more normal, but you're not stuck in monotone. You are learned in monotone. So change that. Now, otherwise, there is some amount of change that can happen on the stage. I would think about it in terms of the size of an audience you're speaking to. If you're speaking to 10,000 people, bring it up a notch. You got to fill the room. Your personality has to fill the room. That doesn't mean fake it, but amplify it. You're speaking to, I have a client whose baseline just energy is through the roof, and he is so good. But I saw him one time speaking in front of 25 people. It was too much. It it was like echoing in the room, kind of just needed to be toned down a little bit. So I think the amplifier can be turned up and down based on the size of the room that you're in. But if baseline is monotone and boring, change that overall.
That's really helpful and interesting. I didn't ever think about modulating your voice or changing your voice based on the audience you're speaking to. And then also that if normal is boring, definitely change it. Yeah, it's something that I'm working on when it comes to creating content. Is my I'm speaking to the camera voice different than
Hmm.
I'm speaking to Matt voice? And like,
Yeah.
absolutely, it is. And
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to make them the same voice, because if I'm speaking to the camera and it sounds like I'm talking to a person, the person on the other side of the camera is going to feel like they're being spoken to
Yeah.
versus, oh, this guy's speaking to a camera.
Yeah. I don't know if this is the case for you. I'm kind of getting the impression you more riff, but I don't know for sure. One thing that's been helpful for me, I would say, it's so funny. The first video I ever recorded, back to Vin Jiang for a brief second. He has his first video he ever recorded in front of a camera on his website. It's mediocre. It's not horrible. But who he is now is like, whoa, you are a personality and you bring that. And he owns it. But I look at my first video. I'm like, bro, if yours was here, mine was all the way through the floor. And I had 7 years of public speaking experience at the time. It is different. One thing that makes it helpful, though, is if you're doing some scripting, not like reading it verbatim, but knowing where you're going, use the language that you would use. Don't don't script like you write. Script like you speak. It's important to not use words that you wouldn't otherwise use, or else you just sound like, I don't know, some annoying person. It'll never come off right if you would never say it.
Yeah.
You don't have the reps on those words to use them appropriately. It's going to sound fake. So I like to have some form of scripting so that you have a trajectory. But just if you're doing that, make sure it's in your own language.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I think this is a perfect transition as we kind of head into the tail end of the episode here,
Yeah.
and we get to pull from some of your wisdom as a speaker coach.
Yeah.
What are some tips? Again, we're getting into the advice realm, which we talked about, but what are some things that are relatively low-hanging fruit in order to help people speak better?
I hate this one, but I have to give it. Actually practice. It's so simple, but I think people mistake practice for preparation. When you're actually, let me bring it back a little bit. If you are speaking in front of 500 people, 100 people, 50 people, call it 50, just for the sake of like who might be listening to this and how likely you're going to be speaking in front of 500 people, 50 people. You got 30 minutes. That's 1,500 minutes. It's more than a day's worth of time that you are taking up. So if you're taking up a day's worth of time, would you not think it worthwhile to spend a little bit of time on your own, making sure that what you're about to say is right? So actually practice, but actually realize why you should practice. You should practice because it's honoring the fact that you are taking people's attention. And that's not something to take lightly. How much to practice? That number's up in the air. At a minimum once. 3 times is pretty good. Think about it in terms of the length of the talk and a multiplier effect that feels right for you. But you do got to practice. Other than that, I think there's an order of operations here. And it's up to you to determine where you fall in that order of operations. I might mess this up because I only recently changed how I phrase it. But mind, message, method. First thing you got to figure out what's going on in here. Before you address anything else, give yourself this space to be able to show up yourself or at least someone similar on stage. Use what works for you. What's going to allow you the space to step onto stage. And you're still going to feel pressure. You're still going to feel nervous. I do too. But find your own way of calming your mind. And it might be deeper than just a couple things you do before you step on stage. But you got to be able to address that first. Next is the message. Really figuring out what are your stories. What is it that feels innate to you that you feel like you need to bring to the world. Focusing on that before you then work on the method, how you say things, the pauses you use, all of that. Because if someone comes up and kind of stumbles through a powerful story, the audience is going to forget them. But if someone just comes up and has the perfect delivery, people might think that that gal sounded cool, but they're not going to actually take anything away from it. So understand where you are in that process. Don't focus on the wrong things. I get this. I came to this through going through the exact opposite order of operations and realizing that's how I would have done it in retrospect. I try to be the perfect speaker, have all the pauses, the posture, the modality, when in reality it was just fluff. So practice and focus on the right things.
That is beautiful and helpful and practical. I'm looking at the camera and realizing that we are on 1%.
Oh
So
boy.
we are going to land the plane for
There
now.
we go.
There'll be a part 2 at some point because this has been so much fun.
Sweet.
But where can people go to connect with you to learn more about you?
Best place to find me is on LinkedIn. Matt Mosich, Mosich. That's the best place to find me. I'm active. I share advice, more philosophy than a typical speaker coach might. But I'm trying to make myself known as a little bit more than just that. Not like there's anything wrong with the speaker coach in and of itself, but who I am deep down is someone that sees communication underlying everything that we do. And it goes a little bit beyond just how you step on stage.
The reason we get along so well is because you share more and you dip a toe into the philosophy. And I just appreciate you so much. I appreciate what you're up to. I'm so glad that we connected and that our paths have crossed. And I think this is just the beginning of us having many talks, asking many
Yeah.
questions, and doing our best to help as many people as we can.
Thank you, Gregory. It's been my pleasure, 100%. Cheers, man.
Cheers. Thanks. And thanks for everyone tuning in with us today. As always, we love you guys.